Nobody lived quite like the stupidly rich Vanderbilt family. They spend millions on mansions, yachts, fashion, and parties. On the surface, it seemed like a fairy tale, but the reality was far darker than anyone realized. Cornelius Vanderbilt didn't come from old money, a powerful family, or any kind of luxury. He grew up on Staten Island in a poor Dutch farming family, but he had grit. This scrappy young man would one day build one of the most powerful family empires in American history. Through sheer determination and a sharp business sense, he built a shipping empire, then expanded into railroads, amassing a fortune that would make his family one of the richest in the world. Staten Island was not quite posh enough for the Vanderbilts, so Cornelius, by this time known as the Commodore, looked elsewhere. Around the middle of the 1800s, he moved the family to Manhattan and built a house right on Washington Place. This area is now the affluent Greenwich Village, where the kids from TV's Friends hung out. Sadly, by this point, the Commodore didn't have much time left. By 1877, the sickly Commodore found himself restricted by his own ailment. For 8 months, he rarely left his house. When it was time to say goodbye to his time on Earth, he looked back at his stunning accomplishments. He'd amassed over $100 million, which in today's money would be over $3 billion. However, before he passed, he had some important decisions to make. The most pressing questions: what in the world was he going to do with all of his riches? The Commodore first handed over $1 million to build a school called Vanderbilt University, which is in Nashville. Next, he had to decide how to divvy up the rest between his rather large collection of potential heirs. When they finally read the will, they likely uttered a collective gasp. The Commodore shocked everyone by leaving almost everything to just one of his heirs. This was his eldest son, William Henry Vanderbilt, also known as Billy. Not surprisingly, the rest of the family was furious, and more than that, suspicious. After all, there was another son and 9 daughters who received next to nothing. As it turned out, Billy had precious little time to enjoy his grand inheritance. In 1885, just 8 years after his father, Billy passed due to a stroke. The remarkable thing was that in that short time, he had doubled the money that his father had left him. Billy would be one of the last Vanderbilts to increase the family fortune. Most of Billy's fortune went to his 2 older sons. First, there was Cornelius Vanderbilt II, who did not increase the wealth of the family due to his great generosity. Then there was the second son, William Kissam Vanderbilt I, who was more interested in horses than amassing a fortune. But that wasn't all. The thing about William was that his wife was more than a handful. In 1875, William married Alva Erskine Smith, who many thought was simply out for his money. You see, Alva's own family money had disappeared, and she needed someone to latch onto for financial support. After all, Alva was an absolute expert on one thing: letting money run through her fingers. At this time, New York high society was quite snobbish, and they didn't accept the Vanderbilts because they came from new money, their fortunes not strictly accumulated through inheritance. This was a thorn in Alva's side, and she needed to fix it. Alva decided to buy her way into high society through architecture. She spent 3 years and $3 million building a home. By the way, that would be about 70 million in today's dollars. Sadly, this did nothing to lift Alva and her husband into high society. As it turned out, William had an eye for the ladies, and Alva didn't like it much. She filed for divorce, unheard of in high society at the time, and did so on the grounds that her husband had cheated on her. William eventually remarried, and he even moved to France, doting on the horses he adored so much. The thing about William was that he didn't really like money. Reportedly, he later said, "Inherited wealth is a real handicap to happiness. It has left me with nothing to hope for, with nothing definite to seek or strive for." Well, his younger brother George had no problem spending the Vanderbilt money. He had an idea to make a real name for himself, no matter what the cost. George Washington Vanderbilt II wanted a big house, a really big house. He chose 51,000 hectares, 125,000 acres in North Carolina, and hired an architect. He wanted a house with 250 rooms covering over 16,000 square meters, 175,856 square feet. Therefore, it's no surprise that the Biltmore estate remains to this day the largest house in America. George and his wife Edith were in over their heads with this massive mansion. Eventually, the family had to do something that most Vanderbilts would have turned their noses up at. Edith's daughter Cornelia opened Biltmore Estate to the public in 1930. Today, the estate has a luxury hotel, an inn, restaurants, shops, and a winery. Another Vanderbilt with a lavish home was Gladys Vanderbilt. In 1934, she inherited a summer residence called the Breakers. This was no summer cottage, as it had 70 rooms and covered over 12,000 square meters, 138,300 square feet. However, compared to her brother, Gladys was a downright saint. Gladys's brother was Reginald Claypool Vanderbilt. His friends called him Reggie, and he attended the prestigious Yale University. Reggie had a reputation for gambling away the family fortune. One thing that the Vanderbilts should have taken into consideration was that they were growing in number. Since the new generation of Vanderbilts didn't seem particularly interested in running the business, the money was quickly drying up. But this wasn't the only pickle they found themselves in. Now remember, the Vanderbilts' fortune came chiefly from the railway industry. But America was rapidly changing. The railroad wasn't the only way to move products anymore. There were airplanes, trucks, and buses as well. This would also cut into the famous fortune. But on top of their financial woes, there was also another scandal to grapple with. By this time, Reggie Vanderbilt had ended up in an early grave due to his drinking. Now his wife and daughter, both named Gloria, had little to live on. You see, the Vanderbilts as a whole weren't so fond of Gloria Morgan and her extravagant lifestyle. So, They had a plan to get little Gloria Vanderbilt away from Morgan and hopefully leave Morgan high and dry. One of the first on the stand was Morgan's nurse, who painted a rather unsympathetic picture of the life Morgan led with her daughter. She claimed their home was filthy and even infested with rodents. The overarching takeaway from this brutal testimony was that Morgan was unspeakably cruel to little Gloria. But perhaps the most stunning statements came from little Gloria herself, by saying she was afraid of her mother. Morgan's lawyers couldn't believe their ears, and for good reason. Apparently, what Gloria had said in court may not have been entirely true. You see, Gloria's Aunt Gertrude, the one who was running this attack against Morgan, had coached Gloria on what to say. Well, her plan worked, and she got little Gloria all to herself. Gloria Vanderbilt kicked off a career in fashion by working as a model when she was just 15. But this was only a stepping stone. In the 1970s, her creativity took flight in a new way. Gloria was so much more than a pretty face. She was also a skilled painter, and eventually her work featured on a line of scarves. An offer followed to put her signature and swan logo on the pocket of a pair of blue jeans. At this time, the idea of a designer jean didn't exist. Gloria and Indian designer Mohan Morjani had an idea to make their designer jeans very, very tight. This caught on with the public, and it led to Vanderbilt shoes, dresses, and even liqueurs. It seemed that Gloria was more like the OG Vanderbilt, ready to make some money. Sadly, this didn't last. In the 80s, Gloria had a fashion company called GV Limited, but behind closed doors, there was trouble afoot. Her former partners had ruthlessly cheated her out of her money. Out of revenge, she took them to court. Gloria sued her crooked former partners, and the trial ended up being so long, her lawyer passed before it even ended. Gloria eventually won the trial and $1.7 million, but sadly, never collected any of the money her partners owed her. But it wasn't only money that troubled Gloria. Gloria Vanderbilt's personal life certainly had its twists and turns. After her third marriage, 7 years with director Sidney Lumet, Vanderbilt finally married Wyatt Emery Cooper. With Cooper, she had 2 sons, and it seemed that Vanderbilt had finally found the right guy. Tragically, their happily ever after would be short-lived. Gloria spent 15 years with Cooper until he perished on the operating table at the age of 50. Little did she know, fate had another horrifying twist in store for her. On July 22nd, 1988, her 23-year-old son Carter jumped out of the Vanderbilt's penthouse apartment. Apparently, it was due to an anti-asthma medication. Vanderbilt's other son, unlike some other Vanderbilts, made his way in life through hard work. This is well-known American broadcast journalist Anderson Cooper. Cooper has said that early in his life, his mother had assured him that there would be no trust fund for him. Because he had no trust fund to fall back on, Cooper worked like an average Joe. Cooper doesn't use the Vanderbilt name much, and rose to prominence without it. In fact, when he became a father himself, he focused the naming of his son on his late father, Wyatt Morgan Cooper, and his mother's maiden name, Morgan. Cooper also shared that, similar to his own mother, he won't be leaving his son a massive inheritance. I don't believe in passing on huge amounts of money. I don't know what I'll have. Cooper is living proof that the Vanderbilt fortune has run its course. Of course, there are many reasons why. Back in 1973, the Vanderbilts got together for a good old-fashioned reunion. This was about 100 years after the Commodore, the one who amassed the original Vanderbilt millions, had passed. As the Vanderbilts of 1973 looked around the room, they all had a stunning revelation. Not one of them was a millionaire. One culprit of the loss of the Vanderbilt fortune was the events they held. The parties were opulent and included expensive food and over-the-top decorations. One party in 1883 boasted 1,200 guests with $50,000, $1.3 million today, spent on the fancy decorations. Another huge expenditure was on fashion. They couldn't exactly show up to their extravagant parties wearing last year's outfit. Alva Vanderbilt, one of the biggest spenders, showed up to an event sporting a pearl necklace worth $50,000. The family's vices didn't end there. Another reason why the Vanderbilts lost their money was their outrageously expensive hobbies. Forget stamp collecting. They were more into horse racing and, of course, yachting. That said, perhaps there's yet another reason for the fading fortune of the Vanderbilts. If you're looking for someone to blame for this rags to riches to rags story, some say to take a look at the beginning. Sure, it was the Commodore who amassed the fortune that the inheritors would lose, but some people believe that the Commodore forgot to teach his heirs an important lesson. The Commodore made the life of his inheritors very easy, but he didn't teach them how to stay wealthy. Some say the Commodore should have done what fellow wealthy patriarch John Jacob Astor did. His idea was to set up a trust that was split in half by his children and his grandchildren. This way, they learned to hold on to their money. Another reason for the fall of the Vanderbilts was their homes. During their prime, the Vanderbilts employed the most sought-after architects. Whether it was a mansion in New York or a palace in the countryside, no expense was spared when it came to creating outrageously beautiful living spaces. The funny thing about the Vanderbilt homes was that they were often empty. The summer homes only had residents for a few weeks of the year. When it came to the city homes, the story was similar. They had a problem passing them down to the next generation. No one seemed to want them. There is a list of the largest homes in America. At the top, there sits George Washington Vanderbilt II's Biltmore estate. But the stunning thing is that the Vanderbilt name appears 6 more times on this list. Even when it came to departing this earth, the Vanderbilts did it with style and a hefty price tag. In Staten Island, New York, there is a mausoleum that serves as a burial site for the Vanderbilts. The designer of the mausoleum was the famous architect Richard Morris Hunt, who took his inspiration from a beautiful abbey in France. The Vanderbilt Family Cemetery and Mausoleum remains a New York City designated landmark even today. The Commodore seemed to know that there was a possibility that his family would lose his fortune. One thing he said certainly rings true today. Any fool can make a fortune. It takes a man of brains to hold on to it after it's made. If you enjoyed this Factinate video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more incredible stories. Want to say in who we cover next? Join our membership program through the link in the description for exclusive perks. Your support means everything to us. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.